Hello everybody, I'm Tessa Shepperson of Landlord Law and the Landlord Law blog, and I'm here with my assistant Mark, and we're going to answer your questions. So, what is the question this week, Mark?
So this is a question from Alan, who is a Welsh landlord, and the question is this: I'm going to invest in a property in Cardiff, but I understand the law in Wales is different. Do you have any advice for me?
Different from England? Yes. Now, I don't know, about 10-20 years ago, the law was exactly the same. But housing is devolved to the Welsh Assembly, and gradually the law in England and Wales is sort of gradually going apart. Mostly this is through new regulations in England, such as the smoke regulations and such, not being effective in Wales, because the Welsh have their own changes that they're going to bring, which will be coming down the line. Now, there are two main Welsh acts, and the first one is, what's the first one?
The Housing Act 2014.
Housing Act 2014. Now, what this act does, this brings in registration and licensing for Welsh landlords and letting agents. So, if you are a landlord in Wales, you've got to register and pay a fee to an organisation known as Rent Smart Wales. And you can find that very easily. If you do Rent Smart Wales, a search for that, you'll find it. It's very important that you do that. If you don't, they're probably going to prosecute you. If you want to manage your property, as opposed to just renting it out through an agent, then you need to be licensed. And you need to do a certain amount of training. Now, it's not too onerous. I think it's just a day's training. There are special courses. I think the National Residential Landlords Association runs some of them. And then once you've done that and you paid your fee, then you can manage the property yourself. If you don't want to be licensed, then you have to use a licensed letting agent in Wales, and all of the letting agents should now be licensed and have done the training and paid the fee. One other thing I should mention about licensing is that if you want to evict your tenant and you serve a possession notice, if you're not licensed, either as a landlord or as a letting agent, that possession notice will be invalid. So it is important. And Rent Smart will prosecute you as well. So it is important that you do that. So that is one big difference between England and Wales, because in England we don't have that. What's the next act?
The Renting Homes 2016 Act.
That's right, the Renting Homes Wales 2016. That, although it's quite some time since 2016, that act hasn't come into force yet. It is going to change the housing law in Wales substantially. It is based on a report that the Law Commission did that was published in 2006, and with their report they published a Renting Homes Bill, and that report and proposed legal changes were never taken up by the government, but the Welsh Assembly are now taking it forward, so that's why it's called the Renting Homes Wales. And some of the change, I'm not going to tell you too much about what the changes are going to be, because the Act may not come into force. I mean, there's already been one Amendment Act before it's even been brought into force, and there may be more. But there are going to be wholesale changes, and one of the changes is there's going to be mandatory forms of tenancy agreements, prescribed forms of tenancy agreements. It is coming. We don't really know when it's going to come into force. I think it was due to come into force either later on this year or next year, but obviously, due to the problems with COVID, that's not going to happen. But it is going to happen at some stage. So I think if you are buying property in Wales to let, the main things to say is you've got to either register or license, so you're legal. You need to be aware that there are these changes coming, and you really need to keep up to date with what's happening and follow the legal press. Although, you know, if you're registered with Rent Smart Wales, they will also notify you if there's any changes in the law. Have I left anything out?
No, I think it's just a wait and see
Wait
sort of
and see.
exercise at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.